Hi, Jesse.
Good morning. How's it going?
Morning. How are you?
Okay. I'm a little bit limited. I may not really be able to be that. I might not be able to present myself at all today because I'm going to be in transit. That's in the later half of the meeting, but I'll be here.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I don't know. Um, there's plenty of things to talk about that have happened, but I wasn't sure if any specific that you wanted to go over.
Well, yeah, we're going to talk about like the sort of the end of the year. I have a short presentation on that, and then maybe some papers I'll go over, and then maybe you could do something first if you have any updates, and then later in the meeting I'll do the review and everything.
Okay. I don't really have any updates. Yeah, I don't think I really do. Since the conference, it's mostly just been I've just been doing a bunch of other stuff, and like I said in the DM, my attendance really been elsewhere this week.
Yeah.
On some urgent stuff, so I don't really have a lot of new stuff to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to make sure that we had that. So yeah, last week we talked about the NeurIPS stuff, like a review of the conference, and so we have that. Sort of digesting that a bit.
I think I had started making a. I think there will be a series of. I don't know. I don't know if I published it or not, but I made a. I think I made like a simple, like ethics or cultural talks at NeurIPS, like Medium post. I don't know if that's published yet. And that was going to be. There could be some other things. Like, I think it'd be cool to do a little. I don't know how much they should be. Well, like a little recap of like the Baby Minds workshop specifically would be good, or something like that too. And I don't know. I don't know if you. I'm not sure that's something that I should just say. Well, I'm going to do this, or open it up. And obviously, if anybody wants to join, they can. But I don't know if there's anything you wanted to do about that. There's so many different things from NeurIPS that I don't know how to organize it. But there's a lot from there that we could use some material.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's. So what I can do about the. About some of this organizing is maybe we could put a call out internally on the Slack. I could ask people if they're interested in doing like a post. I have to kind of think about how to get people involved in that, because I'd like to see other people put things into the medium just as they find time and put together something and then put it in there. I think it would be a nice resource. The problem is getting people to get involved and get excited about it. And so, I might make a call about some of that. But yeah, I think that sounds good. I know it is very hard to get your hands around everything that was at NeurIPS. It's just such a huge amount of stuff there. But I think we have the note document, the shared notes document. We have the 2-hour session from last week where we kind of went through everything and evaluated things. And then I made a Twitter post for last week's meeting it's kind of like posted a lot of the things that we talked about in the meeting with links. So it's we have I think it's a good sort of recap of NeurIPS, and I think that we can follow up on that with some more targeted pieces. I think it'll be an ongoing thing over the next couple months, so it'll definitely fill content.
As far as news and updates, I don't know if I'm not sure if Rashad's doing school stuff, and Anson may also be due. He's got a final actually due, so I'm not sure if he'll be here today. Let's see. Oh, I was going to say. As far as news, I saw you mentioned one of the. You mentioned one of the a conference that will be later in 2021. I forget how to refer to it, but I think it was one that was related to Danny Bassett.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What? I'd be curious about that. Was the deadline this month or in January? I forget.
I think I have a list in the presentation I'm going to give on some of the near deadlines. But yeah, I think, I've been starting this with this talk, but I do need to go over and assemble some deadlines for this coming year. There are a bunch of things that maybe we could potentially target, and then we have to keep track of the deadlines so that we have them, in advance, so we can actually prepare something.
Yeah. Okay, and that's something as I'd be very happy to help sort that out. This next week I think will be a lot more stable for me, so that's I'll have more time to kind of to do that. So that would be good. My only other news besides that is. And I forget to register for this. I think that I did. I think it's just like a Eventbrite kind of registration, but excuse me. The AI debate 2 is the 23rd, and that I think will be. That just looks really amazing. Last year it was just Benjo and Marcus, Joshua Benjo and Gary Marcus, who are kind of, for those who weren't there last year, I wrote up some things about it. I think it's still on GitHub. I should maybe even review that, and maybe I could, in an ideal world, I could make a small article about that for anything. As a side note, I don't just want to put stuff on Medium. There's still a place. I still want to put things on Synthetic Daisies too. So maybe we could. There could be a discussion about how to best do those things, or they can use them to enhance each other, and also there's this specific way to there's a specific way on Medium to basically copy over material from somewhere else and input the canonical link so it links back to the main source, and it's sort of like a way of justifying that. Hi, Ash. But yeah, I would. It would be cool to kind of do a little, prelude or setup to the AI debate too, just because last year it was just two people with kind of, it was a really good debate, but it was very sort of the amount of people that are going to be at the next one which is kind of a really cool thing for all of the there's a tremendous amount of access that's available with how much people are really used to doing, online stuff now. So you'd be able to get everybody there, and the amount of people that are going to be at AI debate too. Like, I don't know whether it's going to be teams of anything or just like a bunch of round tables. But like those discussions, those high level discussions from that feels like that's so useful in many different ways. So yeah. Honestly.
Yeah. I think. I think we definitely. I forgot about that. I didn't realize it was coming up this week. The 23rd is Wednesday, right?
Yeah, so in the middle of the week somewhere. And let's see. That's no problem. Yeah, if you want to, Aksha's saying in the chat, she's a bit late and can't quite hear. If you want to type anything in the chat, that's totally fine too. If you want to give an update just in text, because other stuff isn't working, that's fine. But yeah, the AI debate's upcoming, and that'll be cool. Another thing I would mention, thinking about it, is the Learning Salon, which I had mentioned before here. I didn't get to see all of it, but they had a kind of a year in review recap, 2+ hour discussion on podcast, and it will be, it was a really nice summary of things. And I think you actually saw I think the lab retweeted something I posted about it. I wonder if I can, I don't know if this is going to work. Well, let me try to actually do this. I'm on my phone.
Oh, okay.
And let's see if I can do this. Okay. Are you seeing anything?
Yeah, I see your phone, like a phone screen. It's kind of narrow. And I think that's your, yeah.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. Hold on a second.
All right.
Oops. Let's see. Alright, sorry. Let me try this again.
Okay.
It actually seems to be working okay. But if you can see my Twitter thing here.
Yeah.
So Jovo, as Joshua T. Vogelstein goes by sometimes.
Right.
Well, I'll start with, I think this is the original one. We, as in Critical Neuro, is Ida, and Blam Lab is Cropper. I forget if it's John or Josh. John.
Yeah.
John Cropper. Are thrilled to end the year with they've done 14 other meetings before this, so this is going to be the year-end recap. Okay, great. And this one said there was a big call out to bring everybody they could to this meeting, and they kind of did a little bit of like an ongoing roundtable to bring any past guests through and talk about stuff. I didn't see all of it, but I did see there's a lot of trying to get everybody time in to speak and discuss stuff, and it was very cool. it was at least for people, at least for myself, and like the things that are related to sort of the cognition future stuff, and some of the developmental AI stuff. And I feel like this is just like a really top shelf forum that really tends to address. It really is a great job of stuff. Like between my overall stuff from NeurIPS, which I haven't fully processed yet, but like how I'm framing stuff, and then what I wrote here in the bottom, critical neuro, aka IDA. Ida had a really good point towards the end where she kind of pushed back against this idea that vision is going to be everything. And it's not just her idea, but like it's sort of a pushback against. Well, all we need to do is study vision and how image and how human eyes or a visual system and AI could process things, and that's going to tell us everything we need to know about intelligence cognition. And or this is kind of what it leads to here. Wow, I feel like I'm actually using Twitter like a slideshow right now, and that's something else, but it kind of works. I think what I would say is in slightly more formal terms, I would say yes. Vision is a very accessible thing to study because it is how we get a lot of information, and a lot of you could say vision dominates both Gibsonian information and Shannon information. You could say well that is information in some ways, but at the same time, could you take this and extend it to saying cognition is more than information processing in general? Like that's a potential line of inquiry. But at the very least, I think it's really important to be humble about. Well, yes, we can study vision, we can study deep learning, we can study all this other stuff that's connected to image processing, computer vision, and how we're gonna let's continue to get better and better neural nets that can describe what these numbers are, these images are, these pictures are, and discern personality and gender and sexual preference and all these things about humans by looking at them, and obviously go into all the bias and something like that. Yeah, okay, there's a lot there, but I would like to continue to really delineate what is and isn't. What that can and can't do, I guess. So yeah, we'll stop this now.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. A nice insight. I was kind of actually. That's kind of been my position for a long time, actually, and in that not just my position, but other people. But I've sort of advocated for it. So there is this. I guess if you read the cognitive science literature, if you read the AI literature, there's a heavy bias towards vision, and like a lot of the work, there's Marr published a book called Vision. He didn't publish a book called Touch or Audition. And then, it's like, I know that vision is a thing and it's important for humans, I guess. But there are other things that we do, that other senses that we have, and in other organisms, vision is actually secondary. or maybe not even existent at all. It's non-existent. So, it's definitely worth thinking about, like, what is cognition, or even like in non-neuronal cognition when we talk about that. So it's worth thinking about what is cognition beyond vision. Maybe even like what would cognition look like if you didn't have vision. That's all worth talking about, because it's really gets you maybe down to a more fundamental set of things if you kind of really think about the bias towards vision and say that's just one modality that we have. We have touch, we have audition, which is hearing, we have olfactory sensation. In other animals you have intelligent behavior, and you don't have those senses, or you don't have like the senses in the proportion that you have them in humans, and so forth. So we can think a lot about cognition in that way. But yeah, I think it also goes back to the stuff that you're doing on like the history of cognition and cognition futures. I think that's a very important thing to put in there, is that a lot of the prior work has been biased towards vision. But what happens, say, if you consider cognition outside of vision? What are the
And that's the thing too. Like, as I'd be really, because I know they're out there. I know there are. I'm gonna present an area of things to like, I know there has to be people who write extensively about this, and I don't know I don't just know who they are. So I'm disclaiming my ignorance about a particular arena before I say it. But like, for people that are really hardcore in the camp of screw embodiment, we don't need embodiment for intelligence. It's like, okay, but what are you going, like, how is your intelligent agent going to interact with the world? That's sort of a starting point. And I'm not saying that as if in this is getting way off into theoretical stuff, to an extent, but like, if you are going in the direction, and I think I'm taking this and I'm thinking back to I don't have an easy way to reference this. Well, maybe I can. Give me one moment.
Right.
I'm thinking back to Princeton Envision, which has been this phenomenal conference that hasn't happened this year, but will be happening next year. So, major plug to Princeton Envision. Yeah, I'm just gonna go for it and do it like this. Let me clear this other stuff out for a second. I think back to Princeton Envision, and I think about there were a few. They have a few artistic things there now and then, and I figure it's the first and or second time I was there. Neil Harbison was there, and you may know him. He's sort of a he calls himself a cyborg artist, and one of his things has been about basically pushing for different ways of having senses or interpreting data. Like, he has his antenna in his head, and I forget exactly what it does in this way, but like, he will use things to interpret color differently, or to interpret sound a specific way. And between him and someone also named Kai Landry, who was there last time, who was an artist who was he created a device that that interpreted cosmic radiation, and created sound waves off of cosmic radiation. I don't know if I can pull up his. I don't know if he's on here. This might be him. Yes, Cybernetic from Thailand. I don't know if he's that active on. Oh, he just joined Twitter apparently. Well, there's nothing that great here, but this is what I was talking about. Where I'm going with this extended detour is, if you really, I think vision is a really interesting piece and components to take away and play with. Like, if you're creating an AI system that's main sense, like take away, look at the functionality of what we're talking about here. Like, what is the primary means of engaging with what is external to the agent? Is it vision? In humans we have the five senses, okay, for like direct information channels, right? But there's things that we play around with in our minds to rehash and come to some conclusions and make choices consciously or unconsciously that isn't directly dependent on that. Okay, cool. But like, as you make these agents that are less and less embodied, like, there's sort of I think there's a really interesting space, and I'm sure people have written very good things about this. Like, this is it's so juicy to not do it, but like, where and how? What are you doing? What are you going to do as, like, if you had an agent that was totally in a digital world, like, would digital information, what would you do if vision wasn't really vision? Like, if vision wasn't this physical process of interpreting light, or what have you? Like, what would there be, as you go less and less towards embodiment and towards like the view, like, oh well, humans are just going to upload their brains anyway. Would vision really be a part of that? In the way that we think about it. I don't know, but I feel like there's a whole line of discussion to be had there, because I think when people, and this came up in the I wish I had access to it. Maybe I do somehow. This came up in the Baby Minds debate of my profile. This came up in an AI debate where not the AI debate, sorry, the Baby Minds panel. Like there was a really tremendous. I said this last time, but there's a tremendous discussion about embodiment and the role of embodiment, and it's interesting because on that side, Gary Marks was kind of. There were people like, I want to say Brock, but I don't know if that's the right name. But there were people who were very much like, on the side of the camp where people say, hey, we really need embodiment. We really need embodiment for the whole process. And Gary Marks is kind of saying, well, in reality, what we need is embodiment has been great for the development of stuff, but here we go. This is a much better way to go about this. There. Embodiment was a great way to go about developing the innates to get to our level of cognition, but we may not need embodiment to go to go forward and to develop or to go ahead. And he was kind of taking taking that role as on that side of the camp for the debate or the panel, and I feel like I lost a little bit of where I was going with this, but I think it's really interesting to consider on the spectrum of embodiment and necessity of embodiment, where what are the primary means of I don't quite know how to say this, but like, what are the primary means of acquiring information from the outside world, and what are the needs for doing it? Like when you're a child, when you're an infant, obviously there's sort of like some basic stuff going on, but at that stage of development, even the relative needs for prioritizing certain external information maybe isn't as high as this when you're an adult. So there's a whole. I don't want to linger too much more than I already have on in this space right now, but I think there's a lot to think about there.
Yeah. Yeah, I was intrigued by that conversation we had last week about the whole extreme embodiment versus no embodiment spectrum. So, you have people who think, we kind of know this implicitly, but that there are people who don't really think that you need embodiment at all. And I think if you're training neural networks out of the box, I think that's probably your position, but you don't necessarily state it. So, as opposed to like people who think that embodiment is everything. And there are, people in largely philosophers who are like extreme embodiment people. So, there's like, where does that leave? Yeah.
In a sense, like, isn't, like, I don't really consider it this way, but like for people who like radical embodiment, cognition, like Shimero, and I don't really know what to say about Varela in that sense. But like, aren't they basically saying all of the everything is like built into the embodiment? Like you don't even have any higher level processing stuff. Like it isn't, and then you have people who are very much the opposite of that, and it's weird because like the opposite version is it's like there's the philosophy of, okay, well, it's all symbolic stuff in the mind and representation in the mind, and there's also sort of this computational variant where, well, everything can just be digital computations, and everything's a computation, and those aren't actually the same arguments at times, and sometimes they agree with each other, sometimes they don't, which is interesting. But I think I ended up where you're going with that.
Well, yeah, there's this idea, that everything is either like in the brain, although, be a computational version of that, where everything maybe is in the environment or some mix of the two. I think I don't know if anyone's written a paper exactly on that topic on the continuum. That's an interesting concept. It's like, I know people have talked about the spectrum in terms of like, that there are these two camps. But, if you think about this, like if I were developing, say, like an AI and I had a program, and the program had, like, it allowed me to do, basically embody my agent, either not embody it at all, or completely, go to a situation where it's just like you have a body in an environment and no brain, or just like a rudimentary brain. You had those two extremes, and you could like take a slider and move it across, and you could get a nervous system of varying complexity. On the one hand, you have like maybe this simple integrator that just takes stuff from the environment, depending on the way it's looking, in the direction it's looking and integrate whatever it sees. And again, we're doing the visual example, but versus like something that would take an image data without any body and totally, process it within its neural network, and that's that. And you could have like various intermediate stages of that. So you could take like an agent that had well, you saw from the presentation I gave to Philosopher's Web Cafe, where you can have agents of different shapes with different senses, and they have different levels of complexity in their nervous system. So they might go from like an integrator maybe to something with maybe a ring of neurons that maybe take an input randomly and then operate on it. And it's so you have like these different structures, and you move from one end to the other, and you can actually look at like different hypotheses about which ones are more effective. Even in the case like that, though, you would still have a problem of comparing, like would do the task. Of course, you do the same task, you get a performance curve, but then interpreting that performance curve would be hard because it's you don't really know what the brain is doing, what the contributions of the environment actually are, and so forth. So I'm just thinking out loud here about how we might make this like sort of as a thought experiment, where we that kind of looks like a real experiment where you have these.
It does, yep, and people have actually done experiments on this, and the thing is like this is the gap between the theory. The people who do work with the theory and the experimentalists as such. So the way is an experimentalist, like they design an experiment and then they go to the theory part towards the end, whereas this theoreticians, they have the idea and then they approach it in a different way, which is like they have actually done certain experiments on this, and then it's like a part of a very long study. Even a part of my study has like some components of what you're trying to tell, but the thing is like we don't usually approach it in a very the concentrated absolute way just done. So like that's what I was thinking of, bridging the gap between like an experimentalist and a theoretician. So that's how that's why I am actually like trying to trying to work with this computational as such.
Yeah.
I would just like try to give you an example of how this works, but yeah, I just need some like some background preparation as such to work on it, and then I would like I can give you some example of a hypothesis and how this theoretician approaches it, as well as how an experimentalist approach it. So it's completely different. That makes things different.
Yeah. If that's something you want to do, or
can you repeat it again?
Oh, is that something you want to do in the future, or was that just a hypothetical thing?
It is a hypothetical thing as such now.
Okay. Yeah.
And like I totally agree with what Jesse was telling before. It was like visual, as such, the visual system seems to be more an extrovert thing. Like it's very I'm just losing words. It's very expressive. So whatever you do, you can just put it up in there. It's more of an experimentalist's idea or way of speaking. It's very easy to express things in the visual system, and you cannot usually express, for example, some of the stimuli that you give could be very easily put in the form of visual system as such. So it is actually taken as a substitute for something, like for instance for some emotional in some psychological experiments, they take visual stimuli more frequently because it easily substitutes things. So yeah, it is really something very vast and it needs to be explored a lot.
Yeah.
I think like experimentalists take it as such, like how as I am doing it right now. But theoreticians don't, like they don't take visual system as a fraternity. They have theories which like pertains to each and every system. But inside visual system, there's a lot of things that needs to be looked into.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, there's, in cognitive science, of course, you have this sort of, we know a lot more about vision, I think, than like, say, touch. And there's a lot on audition, but we usually don't think of it as like a primary sense. And I guess, in humans, you do have this sort of vision is sort of a primary sense. And that means that, we see the world and we can see things, and the information is greater, I guess, than, say, like audition or touch. And, this is something that, again, is, maybe it's a bias of experimentation, but, or basically what we know about certain senses, but, it's something it's easy to sort of quantify and things like. So yeah, that's a very good set of points. But yeah, we should.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I can understand what you're trying to tell. Though. Yeah, that's right. Oh my God, that's the like bridging gap between the experimentalists and the theoreticians.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So good, and so yeah, we should talk about this more, maybe in future meetings. Think about it more, and we can think about just one of just one of those philosophical things to some extent where you have to think about like the just why something is the way it is, and so, but it's something maybe we can do some more work on in terms of writing up something or. So I would I put a pin in this topic and keep it in mind. But I think it's something that's very interesting. But yeah, so Ash, I just wanted to check in with you. How are you doing?
Sorry, I just lost it in between.
Oh,
Like
I
you were
asked.
telling, you were telling that we must do this more often, like bridging those. I mean, bridging the gap and stuff. And then I just lost it.
Oh yeah, so I think this is something to come back to in future meetings, maybe as a topic or an idea, just to think about like the why. Why vision, or is it like the primary sense, or is it something that is a undue bias of like cognitive science, or there's there's like vision is important, there's no doubt, but it's like, and then what is the sort of, how do we represent it, what's its proper role, and like if we were going to simulate intelligence, what would be the proper role of vision? And sometimes you have to think about it in terms of a critical assessment, right? Like we just kind of assume that it's the most important thing, and we kind of do experiments, but then there are things that, even experiments, sometimes people will run experiments and they want to study some phenomenon in the world, and sometimes they get the results they want, sometimes they don't get the results they want, but sometimes there are things that they find through the course of the experiment that are like shift their perspective. And so like maybe you have a you have an experiment maybe where you have people who are sighted, and then you blindfold another group of people and you have them do some task, and you come to find out through the experiment that actually touch is actually very important, or the integration of touch and vision, which we haven't really talked about. But there's a whole field of study where they look at the integration of senses. And so, that would be something that if you didn't know about that phenomenon, you didn't think about it as important, you would probably miss entirely. You would say, well, people are just grabbing these blocks, say, and they're putting them in spots, but they're looking at the target and they're putting them at the target, and that's vision is the thing we really want to investigate. But of course, you have other things happening in, like the experiment. This experimental participant is like manipulating these blocks, putting them in a place, and that's a thing too. So sometimes you do these experiments and you try to control for the other things, but sometimes because we have bodies, say for example, those things are going to come into play whether we like it or not. And so thinking about it in that way is like thinking about when we think we have a problem really at hand. Sometimes we actually don't think about it in the right way, and so you'll find examples of that in in cognition. Is there are quite a few examples of people who would study a phenomenon and then find out that there are other factors at play, and then they go in that direction. I can't think of one right off the top of my head, but yeah. So it's always, my point is it's always worth thinking about how we study things and why we study things the way we study them, why we set our experiments up the way we do. And we know that like sometimes you set an experiment up because it's the easiest way to study something, but there's a sort of a reason why people, when they set up, say, an experimental paradigm, they set it up the way they do. Sometimes it's the simplest way to do it, and then you put everything else aside for a while. Sometimes it's that, it's something that they were interested in. So they, I think about maze, like maze running in spatial cognition, where they'll take rodents and they'll put them in a maze, and they put a piece of cheese at the end of the maze, and the rodent will go around the maze. That's, it's a test of spatial cognition. Is it something you'd find in nature? Not necessarily. Is it something that's easy to implement? Yes. Is it something that shows the effect? Well, yes, but it shows the effect because it's easy to implement. Or, it's, if you put them in a naturalistic setting, you might not get the same results. So it's always interesting to think of why people study things the way they do, and that even extends to simulating intelligence. Actually, more so, because you're setting up a system where you're saying, okay, now we have this organism that's intelligent. How do we model this thing? How do we put the pieces together to like sort of approximate an intelligent being? And so embodiment is important because most things that have cognition have bodies. I think that's true. I think maybe all of them do. But the idea being that, they use that body maybe in the service of cognition, but maybe not. We don't know. But that would be like the first step in that line of thinking. Now, maybe I'm just rambling here a bit, but I wanted to get this idea out there. I think it's a good idea overall, and so we should follow up on it. Well, I was going to ask actually. I just wanted to know how she was doing, because I know I had talked to her in Slack about, or email about letters of recommendation. And so I got those out. I got some of them out, and I'll get the other ones out as I get the requests.
I'm too busy with my data collection as such. It requires about 3 complete hours of no break for a part of my data collection. So it takes at least 6 days for a patient, for a subject, for collecting the whole data as such. So it's really so strenuous right now, but things are going fine. It is really nice to be back to the actual normal, and that works for me. And yeah, it's really nice to be back with work as such. And the recommendation thing is, I think for the SUNY optometry, I think I need to be it needs to be mailed. I'll I'm so sorry because my room is quite near the road, so there's a lot of vehicles going and coming in. It makes a lot of noise.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I think for studying optometry, the recommendation letter must be mailed to the administrative person. So I'll just let you know about that in a mail. And I think I did it day before yesterday. I submitted my application for Houston. So I'll send you those details. Houston, I think it sends you the prompt mail when you must submit. When you must submit your recommendation letter. I think that's how it works. But yeah, things are going fine, and it's really nice to be back to work.
Well, that's very good. I'm glad that you're. I'm glad that you're able to run subjects, and I know you're doing experimental work, so. Yes. I've done that in the past. It's very challenging to get your subjects run and to get the data that's clean and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's nice, people just come on Saturday evenings. That's really nice of them. I need to give them back something. Yeah, seriously. That is nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good luck on that. I hope that the data come out pretty nice and clean.
Yeah. Just after collection, I need to clean the data and then do with the data analyzing stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm still, I need to get participants who have undergone LASIK surgery. I think that's quite, it's a bit difficult to find them because, I don't think that much population would be there in the campus. So I need to hunt for people who have done LASIK as such. So yes, it's going on. I'm waiting for the people to come back to the campus so I can start with the post LASIK patients. Yeah, that's quite good.
Yeah, it's always hard to find, if you have a niche subject pool, to find the right people. Because, if you had, I've done this with expertise, where you have to have people who are experts in something, and then you have to find, you have to evaluate, people, and then, balance your pool. So, you make sure that they have expertise or that they have some trait, and then you can go. And yeah,
we are basically checking their perception of blur and myopes, and those myopes are now having, they are now back to their normal, the emmetropization wherein they've undergone LASIK. So, is their blur perception the same or it has been changed? So that is our, the hypothesis. It's not the complete thing, but then that's how the experiment is modeled. So to see how their perception of blur, if it's altered or not. So that's how we go. It's pretty difficult to find people without any, there are some inclusion and exclusion factors which we need to see and pick them up. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, well, good luck with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so, and good luck with the graduate school applications, and Jesse as well. It should be interesting to see what happens this year with, with the application process. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a wild ride. Yes, good luck. Did you say you were applying to Houston? Or where were you looking to?
You asked me about if I'm applying to Houston. It's for the physiological optics and vision science. So PhD in that.
Awesome.
And also at Indiana. and at University of Alabama at Birmingham, and the State University of New York at optometry. I'm just trying this out.
Which place in New York?
I think it's in the it's in like the opposite to the Braitenberg. I'm not very sure of the location.
Oh, but like which part of New York? Would you say like the state of New York? But like there's a bunch of schools there. Which school was it? Like which location?
So I'm not really sure about that. I think I think you have this thing called Albany or something. And
Yeah, that's where I am. Like you let me know if you get in there. I'm in Albany.
Let's see if I can get through, and then like we'll have a this actual meet NeuroSim. We'll make it in the like physical presence or something. We'll try to do that.
Okay, like please
on Saturday morning.
Message me in Slack anything you can about the Albany, like all of your schools, honestly, because I'm curious. But like anything about Albany, let me know. Like I don't have strings to pull per se,
yeah,
but like
sure.
I'll do. I'll. That'd be cool to talk about that. So I didn't know you were gonna do anything. He said New York, and I'm like, oh well, what about? If he said Albany, that's even cooler. Like I have a lot of history there, so let me know about that. That's great.
Yeah, sure. You are applying for your PhD?
Yeah, I am. It's tough because what I want to do is very specific. And there are a few programs that are really good for it. It's just they all tend to be like super hard to get into. Like I really want. I would like to do some stuff at University of San Diego, University of California at San Diego, but I don't know. I feel like my applications aren't really going to be that good for that. So I'm still going to apply to a couple other programs that are PhD. Like I want a PhD 100%, but I think the most likely thing to happen over the next year will be, I think I'm going to try to get into a computer science master's, because some of them are very accessible and some of them are much cheaper than others. There's like, not to deviate too much, but like, there's a lot of BS programs that are $60,000 for 1 year time, and you get like a big brand name, and it's like, those are the money makers for universities, and it's like, okay, no way, like I don't want to, don't add me with that, because I was getting these targeted ads like, hey, why don't you join our prestigious data science? And it's like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. So it's this balance between, I think a master's would help me, especially with I have a varied background, so having something that is like a computer science master's that's decent and respectable, and I do well, and I think that would push me over the top for a lot of stuff. But that also feels more like I'm pretty sure I could start that in the next few months and do that like over the next year, and I think that would it would really rise me to the top level of like PhD acceptance point. But I mean, I'm still applying to some other programs, and if I got into I think I applied to San Diego's psychology program and their cognitive science program. But what I would really like to do is, I was going to apply to their computer science program, but I was disappointed because I found out the people who I wanted to work with aren't accepting anybody this year, and if I could just do whatever I wanted to do, I'd probably either just, I don't know, work in be a PhD student of Joshua Tenenbaum, which would be a great thing, but isn't happening right now. I may still try to work in his lab in some capacity over the next year. If I made some more contacts there, so that'd be awesome. Or do a combined. I would love to work. There's some great stuff at Stanford and places too, but also San Diego has a really good interdisciplinary program in cognitive science. So I really wanted to not skimp on the technical development of it. As much as I'm not a pure connectionist, but I just want to study deep neural networks and that be my life. Like, I want to be able to say, I know how to do that, because I want to be able to say, well, okay, here's this, and then here's what I want to look at. I want to be able to, like, add on from there, basically. But, you know, it's its own process. And even, like, if you asked me this a few months ago or last year at this time when I was applying to other stuff, I probably wouldn't be able to articulate it as well as I can now. So, like, it's a slow, tedious process of, like, knowing how to even communicate your ideas and what you've been doing to like, be a better candidate. I still think I have a little ways to go to get to really where I want to be for, like, a PhD sense, to be very objective. But I'm swinging for the fences at the same time, too. Like, if I get into any of the programs that I just mentioned, then I would totally take them. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I may be slightly less active in the meeting. I am still going to try to listen, but I'm going to be starting to get on the road to take care of something.
Yeah.
So I may be less active, but I'll be checking in.
Yeah. So, yeah, I wanted to go now to, I was going to give a presentation on the end of the year things. So, you know, we're coming up in the end of the year, and it's been quite a year, as you all know. And it's worth, I think, reflecting on some of the things that we have done, you know, and then looking forward to next year. Okay, so we have, okay, I just wanted to check the chat. It looks like we're okay there. So let me share my screen. Here we go. Can you see my screen projecting?
Yes,
Okay.
2020 loading.
Yes, and it's still loading, I guess.
I'm ready to just hit cancel on that, and then we'll start loading 2021. Anyway.
Yeah, I was trying to find a GIF that had like 2020 blowing up, but I couldn't find it yet. It will come.
Critical failure.
Yeah. So anyways, this is our year in progress, almost done. And so we've gone through a lot of changes in the lab, in this group, but in the lab as well. I'm just going to focus on this group. So, so for the first quarter of 2020, from January to March, we had a very tight-knit group. This was coming out of 2019, where we basically studied the developmental Breitenberg vehicles. So we had Jesse, Stefan, Ankit, and Z. And four of them were involved in this developmental Breitenberg vehicle idea. This came out of a Gsac application in 2019 where they all applied, and I think Stefan was the only one to actually get the Gsac award because they didn't, I wanted more people, but I couldn't get them. So we decided just to work together. And we had done a lot of work on various platforms and talking about different ideas. And so we wrote this paper that was the DVB manuscript, which is now on the archive. Many of you have seen it. It's this developmental simulations using Breitenberg Vehicles. I think that's the title. And so we worked on that manuscript throughout this period. And then the manuscript was released into the wild, I think at the end of March. I can't remember exactly the date, but it was about that time. And then sometimes we were joined by Devansh, who is someone I met in the Mozilla Open Leaders program. And so he came to some of our meetings from time to time. And he's interested in machine learning and things like that. So we worked on the DVB manuscript, Gsac 2020 applications, which as you'll see didn't happen. Various demos, and then we did the OHBM Twitter conference. So OHBM is the Organization for Human Brain Mapping, and that was that's coming up soon, again for 2021. It's a conference where they run it on Twitter, and the idea is that you have I think 6 to 10 minutes, but the idea is you want to create 6 to 7 tweets that describe your research. So it's kind of like giving a talk in a conference, except it's just all tweets. So, you can think of like making a conference presentation where you have 6 slides to do everything you want to do and get the idea across. And you have to sort of think through how you're going to design those slides, and then you want to do a tweet where you introduce yourself or your idea. You don't really introduce yourself. You don't have room for that. You introduce your idea, go through the main points, and then go through the applications, and then a final slide or a final tweet. And then you can attach images, so those images can be slides. And the slides are usually pretty visual. So we had a bunch of figures from the paper that we worked out, we worked out from the figures to these nice visualizations, and we attached them to the tweets. And so that was a nice experience, and I think we'll do that again this year. And so that was the one presentation for that period. But then things got kind of rocky. April. So this is at the beginning of the lockdown. And then the group expanded to include Anson Lim, who joined the group in May. And he has a lot of interesting things to bring to the group. Thank you for joining, Anson. And so he joined in May. It was actually on the suggestion of Jesse. And so he started then, and we started working on different things at that point. We started working on Neuromatch 1 and 2. So this is when Neuromatch started. It started in, I think, April, when they proposed to start doing the first Neuromatch. And so by the end of April, they had the first Neuromatch. The second Neuromatch, I think, was in July. So it was a little after this time period, but basically we were presenting at both of them. The Gsac applications were, I think, Jesse and Ankit from the original group both put in applications. And they were both good applications. It's just that because of last year, Google Summer of Code was in flux, and they couldn't fund everyone that wanted to do it. And there were some other problems, and so we didn't get the money that we thought we would get from that. They had to cut the number of projects that they funded. So we decided to switch the stuff that we're doing for Gsac and shift that to something called the MetaBrains project, which then is still, sort of in the background here. But, this is something that's been open sourced. The idea is you have these different hybrid models of brains, basically. So we have different models that you can interconnect and layer on top of one another. So you might have like a neural network that doesn't really have much representational capacity. And then on top of that, you would have another type of model that has a lot of representational capacity. And so those two models would work in concert. And then that would be a way forward in terms of simulating intelligence. And so that kind of grew out of what we were talking about with the Gsac project. But this is something that's sort of been, on the back burner, but we're still sort of working on it. It ties in a lot with the Breitenberg Vehicles stuff and with the stuff we did for baby minds. And then we, of course, did a presentation, which I'll talk about in 2020.3. So for the second part of the year, worked on the Neuromatch conferences, the Gsac applications, and then the CSV Conf presentation. So CSV Conf is a conference that has, it's basically like informatics, and there are a lot of library science people there. They're interested in like open data and other topics related to that. They also have a penchant for llamas. They have a llama mascot in the group. So that's an interesting conference. It was supposed to be live, and then it got pushed online. And I don't know if they're going to be doing a virtual version this year, but we should try to target that for this year as well. I think we can do a follow-up to the presentation we did on the epistemological directories. And that's something we actually worked on, a bit. Starting there, we started trying to get some critical mass on that project. And maybe, extending it to this Torley Bird note-taking idea that we've been working on recently. where we have, these notes and kind of integrating them into that platform. And then now Jesse has the Cognition Futures project, so we can, find a space in there. And of course, we can present on this stuff at other places too. I don't necessarily think we have to limit it to there, but that seems like a nice home for it. That kind of community. But there are other places we can target as well. We'll talk about that later. So that was that part of the year. Then as we moved on into July, we got we're still sort of in lockdown. But we were working now. Neuromatch Academy comes along. And this is, of course, the summer school that was founded because summer schools were being canceled. And so we had Jesse and Anson. So we had, I think Ankit and Z and Stefan all had other things to do. They were, busy with other things. So they were working on those things. And Jesse and Anson stayed with the group. But now we started getting people from Neuromatch Academy and the MIT CBMM people. So these were people like Bhavik, Angela, Prakash, Rishabh, Piyush, Furkan, Akshara, Seven, and Suniti. And so all those people from time to time have been in the meetings. Thank you for attending the meetings. We have, these were the two things that we kind of brought people into the Slack group, if they're associated with Neuromatch, associated with this other conference, this other summer school. We also set up for Neuromatch Academy, we set up an introductory prep session. So this was where people were, we were kind of getting people engaged with Neuromatch before it happened. That was something we threw together kind of quickly, but, it was something maybe we'll do this coming year, or there's some potential there. I don't know exactly what it is, but, and then I was a mentor during Neuromatch. So I drove along with Jesse, we drove the prep sessions, and then the projects. I mentored two projects outside of this group. There was one that was actually featured in one of the final sessions for Neuromatch, so that was nice. And then the group that I mentored here, we did the can't remember what it is now, the feedback loops project. And so we did that for Neuromatch Academy. We also did this A-Life 2020 presentation for this Devo NN workshop. So this was where we did a presentation on hybrid models, the MetaBrain models. And I actually got one of my former Gsac students that I had in 2018, and I got back in touch with him, and I had made him an author on it because of the work he did in 2018. And it was nice to have that, exposure for the lab. So definitely check this presentation out. We should target more things like this in the coming year. There was also a poster at Dynamics Days 2020. That was largely myself. And then we did these in-group tutorials. So during these meetings, I've been presenting different topics. And I don't really know what to do with these tutorials, except maybe, expand some of them out. The one that I did expand out most recently was the modeling talk that I gave, the observer dependent modeling talk that I gave at the Philosopher's Web Cafe. That was originally like a 20-minute presentation in this group, and then I sent it to, I expanded it, and then I gave it to that other group. So presentations included the Devo NN workshop, Information Theory for Modelers, which was something I found out that I had recorded separately from the group. So that's in our YouTube channel. This Dynamics Days 2020 work, which was on heterochrony. This is something that I also presented on. This is a video. It's actually in our DevoWorm group, but it's something that I haven't really presented to this group at all. And then Introduction to CGS, which is another presentation on our YouTube channel. So in this period, I started making these videos that were sort of tutorials about things that we're doing in the lab. Things we can bring to the world that are unique to our perspective in the lab and what people are doing here. So that was I think those are nice. And I'd like to get people engaged with that content as well. I think that's a good way to go. I think making like just sitting here with your webcam on and then just doing a presentation, I think that's actually a nice way to get ideas into the world. And it's also a good way maybe to even practice your own talks. If you want to practice a talk and you don't know, just sit there with your video camera on and go for it and see, get your timing right. In this case, we're making these videos for people to look at and say, oh yeah, that's an interesting approach to this problem. So then in the fourth quarter of the year, this is October to December, this last part, we had more or less the same group as in 2020.3. We had Gabrielle Smith, who just kind of joined our Slack. I put a Slack pass up on one of the blog posts that I made, and I guess she had clicked through that and gotten into the Slack, and I haven't heard from her since the first meeting, but that was around Thanksgiving. So if you're watching, Gabrielle, you're welcome to come anytime to our meetings. And if you want to join our mailing list, I can put you on. Just contact me. You can contact me in Slack. Let me know. But in terms of recruiting people, we haven't really recruited any new people recently, but that's only because the events are not, we didn't have the events that we had during Neuromatch, say. We worked on a couple things here. We worked on these NeurIPS submissions. So we worked on a submission to the Baby Minds workshop. We worked on a submission to the Shared Visual Representations workshop. And both of those were rejected. It wasn't that they were horrible. It was just that they didn't fit well into those workshops. And that's fine. The Shared Visual Representations paper is actually up on open review. So that's, and we can issue a new version and responding to the editor, the reviewers, but we don't have to do that right away, but it's up there. So it's, and then the other paper, the Baby Minds paper, is also publicly available on ResearchGate. That's something I'd like to update as well in the new year. But, that's something we can talk about later. We also talked about this Twirlybird shared note-taking approach, and we just did this, Rashab and Jesse worked on one for NeurIPS. So this is something we'll be doing going forward. We'll have these shared note-taking documents where we, if we attend a conference virtually, we can put in notes from the different things. You can sort of distill the content into like different things that are interesting to you, or maybe or you think are important, and you put them into this document. And then we can go through later and review it. It's just a matter of distilling and curating content. We also made advances in our GitHub management. We have this new GitHub organization. We made a bunch of Neuromatch 3 presentations, and there's a blog post on Synthetic Daisies about this, and I might make a little note. I might actually do a post on our Medium on reviewing the year where I put a link to that post in it. So I might prepare something based on this presentation. I'll put it on the Medium. And then we sort of attended the main conference in NeurIPS, just kind of like as a group. Different people would log into different talks and make these notes, either in the note-taking document or on Slack. And I haven't figured out a way to optimize like these Slack channels in a way that curate the content there, but we're working in that direction. And then we've explored niche topics. So the presentations, I made a seasonal update a couple months ago, again on YouTube. We made 4 to 5 Neuromatch 3 presentations, which I think is excellent. It's great. And then this Philosopher's Web Cafe talk that I gave last week, that's also on YouTube now. So they're all, made a lot of progress this year, I think. And so then looking forward to next year, what are we thinking? So from just kind of talking with the group, we have this interest in philosophy, ethics, and neuro AI, which is an amorphous area, but I think it's something that can go further in that direction. I think we have a lot of interests in that area. We can kind of explore and see what we can get. And then, when opportunities come up, like workshops or conferences, we can submit to those and see what happens. We can also write papers, and as a group, if we have a good idea, we can write it up and then eventually get it out, either in our blog or maybe as a preprint or maybe even as a paper in a journal. It just depends on what it is. We've also talked about the history of cognition and this idea of the cognitive futures. So I know history and futures are kind of, well, they're the same thing more or less. I mean, it's just kind of going in different directions. But that's another area that we're going to focus on. Then the neurosimulation stuff. So we're talking about the metabrains models and the developmental Braitenberg vehicles. We'll just continue with that. Representation, those topics, and computing, those topics all fall into that same category. And then finally, Anson's talked a lot about allostasis, and I presented on allostasis machines, I think in one of the Neuromatch conference talks, so we should probably follow up on some of that. I think that's good. Another good topical area to focus on. And if people have other topical areas, they can propose them, or within this framework, they can propose certain ideas. This isn't exhaustive. I just tried to throw a bunch of things that we've been talking about together in terms of, this isn't a formal roadmap. This is just kind of to raise awareness. So things we have to look forward to in 2021 is this new Medium blog, the new GitHub organization, continued collaborations with Neuromatch. I know that right now, Conrad is organizing a deep learning course that is, sort of accessible. So, there are opportunities like that, but definitely Neuromatch going forward. And then other open educational organizations. I'd like to integrate maybe more with the DivaWorm group, which is doing good work on things that are sort of semi-related to what we do here. So integrating with DivaWorm, and then something called the Rockware community, which I am now a community manager of. So this is a group that is interested in developing software. It's more developing software, but there are a lot of educational opportunities for open source that we might interact with on that side. So deadlines for things coming up. This is something I'd like to make a more formal, maybe something we can incorporate into our events table. We can provide deadlines and priority reminders. So if we have a deadline coming up, we want to make sure we meet it. We want to make sure it's in our face so we don't miss it. And so I think in late January, there's going to be the abstracts opening for the OHBM Twitter conference. January 31st is this is the SIGCHI workshop on emergent interaction. This is the thing Jesse was referring to earlier in the meeting. And there's a link now to this workshop, emergent interaction at github.github.io. And this is this workshop, I can't remember who it is, but I think it's Dan Bennett or someone like that, and a bunch of other people. It's associated with SIGCHI, which is the Human-Computer Interaction conference. And I think they're looking for position papers. There's more information on the website, but that's due January 31st. And I think it's like a 4-page paper. So it's something, again, it's going to be like the NeurIPS submissions. March 7th, we'll have the full papers for A-Life 2021. So this is like usually an 8-page paper. For this, and this is like the A-Life conference, which will be a hybrid virtual physical conference this year. I was thinking of like turning around what we did for Baby Minds and expanding it out a little bit and submitting it there. And again, this is actually probably a better fit because they do a lot of like organismal simulation and things like that. We might also think about submitting something on embodiment because they really like that topic there. Mid-March, we'll be on the lookout for the CSV Conf, the 6th version of this. So I don't know the details on that yet, but that's about the time that it was last year that we had to submit things. Neuromatch 4, we don't really know when that's going to happen, but we definitely want to stay on top of that. Envision is happening in 2021, and I think Jesse said it was virtual, so we'll also want to stay on top of that. Really, anything that we can find that might be suitable for this work. We want to make sort of, keep our eyes out, and then if we find a deadline that we might be able to make, we put it into a table or something, and then make sure everyone's aware so we can kind of make some of these. Because the problem is, we have these venues, but it's like they have these deadlines that if you don't know about them in advance, it's kind of hard to make a submission. So that's all I have on that, and I think that's a good summary of the year. I think we'll have a pretty successful 2021. So any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that looks good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
There's got to be a way to integrate like a Google Calendar and a spreadsheet, because I feel like it's not hard to manually maintain one of those things, and I did that in Notion, and I'm trying to do that in Sheets, but I think there could be, every meeting could start with here's the calendar, what's ahead, and do we have anything to add to it? That could just be a very simple 10-minute, 5-minute process that we do every week in the meeting, just to kind of stay abreast of that. I think that would be really good. And also incorporating things highlighting things like funding opportunities. I mentioned this in Slack just now, but just Google, everything Google, Google Summer Code is a funding opportunity. But there are other things too that are available, even if they're sort of non-traditional or different types of approach. I think that would be, highlighting those things will be interesting, and maybe also recruitment will always follow those kind of things too. So I'm not feeling we have to get 20 more people to join lab this year. I'm not that attitude.
Yeah.
But I think what I would I guess add
in a general sense, now that I think about it, from a quote-unquote lab manager perspective, is I think the lab is growing in some really nice ways, and I think there's been some organizational development that's happened this year, and I think it excites me, and it's been a really big learning process too, which I very much appreciate as someone who wants to. I guess someday I might want to run my own lab. I'm not entirely sure about that, but learning, there's so much. There's this whole, I find it very cool because this lab is uniquely open to talking about education. I really like that education is in the lab's title, and that it's actually part of what we're doing. Because a lot of times, to be very honest, every other lab that I've been in, and most of it's limited to undergraduate work, but I've been in a few different places by now, and the labs tend to deal with information and what we're doing in a very horizontal level, I don't know if horizontal or vertical is really the right way to put it, but it tends to be in one dimension or something like that, or a very specific set of dimensions, and there's not really a meta component of how are we teaching, how are we learning, what are we trying to learn, how does that impact things. And I feel like that's frankly inadequate. I'm not saying everybody who ever does research in science has to become purveyors of educational components and material and think about that. No, you don't have to do that. And I even get to an extent there may be some snobbery about it in the sense of, we only focus on basic research, getting results and getting our data and cleaning our data and putting it in papers. That's all we focus on. I get that. But at the same time, I've been really fortunate for I have my space to go about that here in orthogonal research and education lab, which is great. But at the same time, being able to meet the Learning Salon, for what I'm gonna
inadequately referred to as Conrad Cording's crew. Like, the people that kind of follow around him and the opportunities that he's creating, like, those are really important opportunities, not just because of the accessibility, but there's a tremendous amount of openness about what I'm talking about here regarding this educational, developmental component of training people. Like his approach to it, it's different, but like even what Bradley mentioned about the Conrad's basically creating a semi-open source, open involvement, volunteers welcome, deep learning course at UPenn, and where he's at. And I'm got in as a volunteer, and I'm not a deep learning expert, but I'm going to try to volunteer with some like testing and review and like, you know, editing stuff. And that's great, like, for me to learn, but also it's great in the sense of what there are people in the community who are interested in accessibility, but also very interested in the educational and developmental components. How do we actually have better training and education, insights, and research into XYZ? And that's such an important thing compared to nature, so let's just focus on these paradigms. And there's a whole big philosophical, meta, big picture conversation about the direction of you know, academics, research, and funding, and that goes into that too. We don't have to go in there now. But what I want to say is, I think there's, I really admire and I'm happy to be a part of that in those communities, and I want to continue to build upon that. And we are, like, I said that, but like, we are doing that, and I think that's something that's maybe hard to convey. And we could maybe next week, or we could do a specific presentation about this topic in the lab if you want to at some point, Bradley. But I feel like it's actually really, that's a cross-disciplinary impact, and it's something that enhances what everybody's trying to do. Because if you train people to in educational process as well, yes, but also like it has a downstream enhancement effect to what people are doing when they're doing their research too, and I think that's really important. And it brings up a lot of issues and controversies too, because you know it runs head to head with the infrastructures and well-trodden paths of funding and development and everything else. So I mean, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds about that right now, but like, there's just a lot going on in that space, and I think it's great to have, you know, you can only talk about it so much in certain ways, in different you know, in general, but I feel like there's quite a bit there, and you know, we're a small lab doing things here, but the impact and the goals and the meaning of this stuff is not trivial at all, in my opinion. So that's maybe an unexpected soapbox on my part, but yeah, I believe in that. And then just to go back to a little more concrete stuff, yeah, organizationally speaking, I think we're doing well, and I think over the next couple of weeks, looking at the calendar, there was, I mentioned in Slack that I would like to create a set of proposals to vet within the lab, or just in general, and then we can focus on what we want to do, and also just do some call for involvements from the general public. Because everybody, now's the time people are going to be thinking, oh, what am I working on next year? What can I do for my... I mean, people are looking for spring internships. Like, we could say, hey, get an internship in orthogonal lab working on a meta-brain project. Like, that's something we can do, and people were looking for that still. It's, you know, spring or summer or whatever. But like, those are things that we can put out there, or like, here's a project on, if you're really interested in epistemological directories, and kind of making that project a little more accessible. And say, oh, someone's like, oh, I see what you're doing here. Here's relates to like some broader interest that I have. Let's do it. Like those things are. There's a lot of those things that are really just waiting to be pruned a little bit and fixed up and ready to go. And like there could be a lot of really cool stuff happening there. So I'm excited about 2020, and I really like the lab 2021. To be honest, I'm not so excited about 2020, but we've done great things in spite of it anyway. But I think there's a really important space here, and with a little bit more development of certain things, there's a lot that could be happening, and progress could be made on many fronts. So I'm excited about that.
Good, yeah. Thanks for the feedback. That was good. I think we should focus on some of these, kind of getting people involved in terms of specific projects, like making calls for participation. I think that's good. I haven't really had a chance to do that, or maybe that's something we should spend some time on. As a thing that we make a point to do. There's got to be, I'm sure it's going to be attractive to people. The question is, how do you sell it? How do you interface with people are already doing? Because a lot of people do things, they have like their projects that they're doing, and is it something they can either pick up as like a secondary thing or incorporate into their own work, or maybe it's someone who wants to do something that's, something that just is something they want to do. Not having funding is going to be a bit of a problem to recruit people. I mean, if we had like a pot of money, we could say, oh yeah, here's an opportunity, it pays X amount of dollars. It's this length of time, but we don't really have that right now. So, I mean, the other option is to say, well, this is attractive to people who want a, research topic. It's something that we can get, because open source projects tend to be like where people will participate as they can, but then that's a slippery slope because oftentimes people, don't have time to maintain it, and so it doesn't really go anywhere. And so, I mean, we'll have to think that through a little bit. But I think it's a good idea. We should pursue it more forcefully.
Oh yeah, and I feel like there's a natural flow to. I mean, it could be either there's a natural flow to doing that, but I think at the start of the year, and the next couple of weeks, I've been super not. I haven't done anything on any part of anything academic this week. I've been totally away, doing some things. But in the next couple of weeks, I feel like there's a really good opportunity to, and we can talk about this more later, obviously. I'm sure we will, but I think there's an ongoing ability to establish that into some of the administrative part of the lab in general, but also I think there's this period ahead where we could really pick out a few things that we want to even just create a rolling application situation for people to join, a simple web page saying, hey, here's this project, if you're interested in this, reach out to us. I think that those things are not, those would be great to formulate and crystallize the project, as we know, with all the presentations and anytime we talk about stuff. But also, it kind of gets at, when I started as lab manager, that's one of the things that I really wanted to address, because there's these things. Obviously, we talked about note-taking and the twirly birds and turning them into something before they go into the ether or into the ground or whatever. But at the same time, there's projects too, and that's sort of a bigger, a much heftier twirly bird, but at the same time, it's a heftier deliverable to resolve from it. If there's a way to just crystallize that, and when people join, people come by, or wherever, it's just these things are ongoing. And this is something that I think about too, even in a broader sense. I've been doing, Akshara's been looking at applications, a lot of people here are looking at graduate school, just all big nerds, and that's great. But, you get a sense of looking at labs and there's a necessity to be a little bit vague about stuff, but I'm not trying to say that's not the case. But at the same time, some people just have a very poor way of presenting what they're doing, and it's hard to tell. Like it's and it's not like everything has to be public facing for a lot of labs. Like I'm not saying that's the case either, but I feel like we've made a lot of progress on that front. And when people can say, "Oh, here's the project, here's the thing," like making, I think there's quite a bit. Yes, I say even for younger scientists and early career people, or whatever. Like if you have just a simple way to have access to what you're doing and get it, and especially be involved, and oh, what do I look at? How do I sign up? X, Y, Z. That's kind of how it goes. And then, yeah, just like an undergraduate in school, I mean, I've been in 2 different institutions and they all different flows. It's in the following category. People sign up, and then a lot of people drop out, and they say what's up. And like that's how it goes when it's sort of in that situation, and that's fine too. But having the means by which people can just address that and say, oh, here's a project, here's what are some needs of what I can do, or open issues in GitHub, whatever, help wanted labels, and just sort of having like available and making that streamline easy. And then obviously Bradley is always available, and I'm usually available to talk about stuff. So like that end of things is just fine. But I feel like there's really what's my actual motivation for saying this is not so much administrative stuff, but more like there's really cool things that we're getting at here, and I don't want that to be buried. Not even as what we're doing, but I think that's an issue that many labs have. Like how do you like you have to be jargon specific for certain things because you're going in depth in a very specific area, but how do you connect it to big issues that excite people? And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot of. So anyway, I will step away from that monologue. And outside of that, there's a lot of great stuff ahead. And I guess the other thing I would add is I've crystallized some stuff within the Cognition Futures group that I'm doing.
Yeah.
But as I said before, NeurIPS and the Learning Salon and the AI debate, I feel like those things, 2 of 3 happen next week. But those things are really refining some of my goals and approaches. And I feel like I'm getting better and better at articulating what I want to do. No, like honestly, this is not to be a whole lab thing, but like I would love, and I actually put this out on Twitter, and I got a few responses, but I would love to have a I don't know how to label this discussion, but a discussion with people who are leading research teams or in labs or whatever about how you structure your research inquiries and like some of it is okay, you need to have troops, you need to have people on the project, you need to have people doing the work. Okay, yes, but there's also like there's this art form to basically research leadership. I don't know what to really call it. That I'm really interested in. And obviously, I'm playing around with that in my lab editor stuff, but that would be a fun conversation to have too. But yeah, I think I've said quite a bit, so I'm gonna return the mic now.
All right. Ash, do you have anything to add? Did you have any questions or comments?
Not much, but yeah, I agree with, it was more relating. This NeuroSim was more relating to me, like it's more relatable to me. Apart from that, I don't have any add-ons, but
Yeah. Well, that's good. And again, if you have any thoughts, you can put them in Slack or.
If there's any particular projects that you have in mind, I know there was I think you were involved with the anime feedback project, and that's
yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, that's still on hold.
Yeah, I haven't been active on that myself for a little bit, but we can talk about revising that or anything else that you'd like to.
Yes.
Like at different levels of commitment too. Like if you're doing a bunch of your own research, like if you just want to give an update every now and then on stuff you're doing in your own lab, like I'm fine with that. I don't know. I'm sure Bradly is to some extent.
Oh yeah.
But like I'm not saying you don't have to be like, hey, why don't you be leading your own project in the lab? Like you don't have to do that. But different levels of stuff that you might want to. Different ways you might want to engage or share what you're doing. Like I think we're all totally open to that. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, sure. Like maybe if we can, I'll ask my coordinator if can do with that. And yeah, we need to work on the feedback project as such.
Yeah.
You have to like start from where we left off. Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of got pushed back. I guess just things kind of went. This is how we do things and then they get pushed back. That's why we try to do this, keeping things in people's faces. But so it doesn't always work. But I think that'll be another thing we can maybe revisit this coming year is the feedback project. And of course, maybe next year we can do, like as Neuromatch Academy comes up for 2021, we can revive it and see, because there's a lot there. I think maybe we didn't have exactly the right data, or maybe we need to think through the thing a little bit more before trying again to really kind of, get some real good results. I mean, there are all these things we can think through. So I'll think about it more, and we can talk about it in Slack. So yeah, I think there's a lot there. And again, if you want to present on your own work, you can do that as well in the group. I'm very open to that. So finally, for the last 10 minutes or so, I'd like to go through a couple odds and ends I have. I'm not going to go through any papers per se, but I'm going to go through some folders that I've had in here that I wanted to kind of share some thoughts about. So I found this book online the other day. It was actually Michael Levin who posted something on Twitter about he had a link to this book, and I actually found a copy of it in the library. So this is Cybernetics in Development. This is Michael J. Apter's. This is an older book, but it does talk about cybernetics in development, and I think this is the embryo in specific terms. So this isn't developmental psychology. This is more developmental biology. But this is a older take on cybernetics, and we did a paper in 2018 on this topic. Sort of in this group, different people. It's a paper in Biosystems. It's on one of the websites, and so if you're interested, then I can make the paper available. We talked about a lot of things in that paper. We talked about thermodynamics and game theory and all this. And this is more about like building a cybernetic model of development. So
I don't know if I've seen the paper you just mentioned. I don't know if that's one I've seen before or not. I think it is, but if you could definitely put that somewhere. So yeah. Again.
Yeah, I definitely will. So but this is actually, he's trying to build sort of I guess like, a bunch of transfer tables and all this stuff. He's probably trying to make this into, so he has an appendix, an information theory appendix, So this is back, this is pretty much Shannon information, very raw Shannon information, this was back, I know we talked about this in the information theory talk, but this is back when people would apply this to everything, and then it turned out that maybe that's not the best way to describe it. It's kind of like the way deep learning is now, or machine learning. They're applying these models to everything, and then eventually, like for example, they applied Shannon information to, perception, different aspects of perception. They're applying Shannon information to development. And so, I mean, it's all very nice, but it's like, it would be maybe interesting to revisit this in light of the modern sort of modern worldview. So this is the standard cybernetic model here. Information source, there's an encoding to a transmitter. You have a message channel, you have noise, and then you have this receiver, and then there's information. So there's a message embedded with noise, and you have to decode the information out of it. And so it talks about redundancy, all these things. This is a nice way to, like, if you don't really understand Shannon information, this is actually a nice sort of overview of it. Then he talks about Turing machines and about development as well. I think this is more just about Turing machines. Let's see. This is the Jacob and Monod work. So Jacob and Monod were pioneers in looking at gene expression. So they worked with yeast or bacteria, and they actually were able to work out some of the mechanisms of gene expression. So they worked on E. coli and lactose, and they had they were able to tease out lactose from lactose metabolism, a lot of the mechanisms of gene action and gene expression. And so they coined terms like repressors and promoters and things like that. If you hear about that when people talk about gene expression, that's where it comes from. And so this was new, I think, at the time, so he puts a lot of that in here. Then this is the cybernetic approach, so this is like a second-order cybernetics approach. So again, this could be updated for the modern era, but they basically make these proclamations about cybernetics. The problems of development, so the relevance of cybernetics. And so, I mean, this is there are a bunch of chapters in this. If you development on the computer, actually, this is a good one to go over. So this is actually, I like this term. The computer chosen for the research reported here was a National Elliott 803. I don't even know what that is. It's not something that we use today. Let's just put it that way. So this is a very old study, it's very quaint in a lot of ways. But you can see how he lays out how he's going to build this program around development. And so I think this is more historically interesting, but also, going back to these old classics, you get a sense of where things have been, and you get a sense of maybe questions that could be asked anew. And so if you want access to this, I think this is a shared thing. I'll put it in the chat. I think this is something that is open, if not, just ask for permissions on it. Another thing, when I was doing the talk last Friday to the Philosopher's Web Cafe, I had on the title slide, I had my different agents, and I had a reference to the game Pac-Man. And I don't know, both of you are probably not of the age where you really thought about Pac-Man too much. But when I was a kid, this was there was a mania. They called it Pac-Man Mania. And this was in the early 80s when I was a small kid. And I was very interested in video games. And so I learned all the names of all the ghosts and everything, like everyone of my age did at the time. And so this is an interesting thing, because the Pac-Man ghosts are, they're 4 ghosts. They have their own personalities, apparently, in the game. They're different colors, and apparently they have their own personalities. And this is a blog post on understanding Pac-Man ghost behavior, because the Pac-Man ghosts are actually agents that are computational agents that are autonomous, and they chase Pac-Man around the maze, and they try to catch Pac-Man in different ways. And it was never clear to me playing the game if they were like stochastic or if they actually had they could figure out where Pac-Man was, because sometimes you could fool them and sometimes you couldn't. And so I never really understood the programming behind it. And then I just kind of lost interest, when I was an adult. But this is, so I came across something called the Pac-Man dossier, which is a ridiculously detailed explanation of the mechanics of Pac-Man. So he talks about Pac-Man and the ghosts and the personalities, the common elements of ghost behavior. They talks about the target tile. So he kind of demystifies a lot of this. Why do I bring this up? Well, it turns out that, if you... so these are the 4 ghosts here. Shadow, Speedy, Bashful, and Pokey. And if you look at the date here, it's 1980. That's when the game was released. And then it was popular throughout the 80s, like the early to mid-80s, even into the late 80s. And then another thing that came out in 1984 was Breitenberg's book, Valentino Breitenberg's book on vehicles. And so I actually, in my mind, I didn't think about this. I thought that vehicles had come first and then Pac-Man, and I didn't realize that Pac-Man had actually come before the vehicles book. But anyways, in this book, he talks a lot about the different personalities of different vehicles. So he proposes these different vehicle designs and then the personalities behind the vehicle designs. So certain vehicles are, friendly, some are shy, some are happy, and, he gives them this because they respond to light in different ways. And I think Ankit actually explored this a little bit in his simulations. Ankit Gupta.
Are you showing the book now or still the Pac-Man?
Oh, no, I'm still showing the Pac-Man. I don't have the book up.
Okay,
but
sorry.
I'm just thinking this through. And so I just think that's a really interesting connection between Pac-Man ghosts and then the Braitenberg vehicle behaviors. And I think yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I have something to say after this, but yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I'm kind of done with that.
I was basically going to say, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're basically saying the goal for the lab this year is we have to complete the circle. It started with Pac-Man, then Valentino Breitenberg, then we made developmental Breitenberg vehicles. Now we have to make developmental, Pac-Man monsters that are demonstrating, swarm behavior and this higher level cognitive. We have to do developmental Breitenberg Pac-Man ghosts, is what I'm hearing.
Well, not really, but yeah, but I think it's an interesting connection because we don't really think about, I think they were thinking about this in different ways. If you know anything about early video game design or even modern video game design, you know that there's a goal of trying to build agents with a personality. So later video games, you would have they would invest a lot into, in the Sims game, which is a simulation. They've invested a lot of money into building Sims with different personalities, and you can follow a Sim around its daily life, and that there's a lot there that we don't. I mean, there's a lot there that we could talk about and think about. So I mean, moving away from Braitenberg vehicles or ghosts and Pac-Man, we can think about embodied agents that are these, autonomous agents that have a personality. And how do you model personality? Is it just about in the vehicles where you have a couple of connections that give it a basic personality, like an aversion to light or, an attraction to light? Or is it something more complicated? Do you need to build a huge neural network to say, oh, this sim is happy. It's jumping up and down. That's an expression of its happiness, but inside, it has this happy thought that, it can generate happy thoughts, something that humans recognize as happy thoughts. So, I mean, there's a lot there, I think. It's just I think this is an interesting sort of base level thinking about it. Can you create these simple agents that have personalities? are there strategies that they use? How does that get expressed? And so,
Well, yeah, and like two things like really jump out. Number one, I was obviously being a little bit silly in my comment, but at the same time, I'm actually intrigued by the core of what I was saying. Like I think this is maybe the best segue that's come up in the lab of like things in Josh Tenenbaum's lab. Like they've done a lot of stuff like multi-agent learning and like there's like one of the recent papers is about like chef like coordinating different chefs cooking in the kitchen and how to do that and how like the things about agents being able to recognize other agents' goals and seeing that as something they want to help or not help. And things about personality, like we're saying here, like that, I feel like that's definitely something I would like to do someday. And if that's an evolution of things that we've been doing here, that's great. I wasn't sure, but like I have to say, like yeah, for segue connection purposes, that's all like. I think that's a really cool, maybe even a very one of the more. That might be one of the most like. Because so many of the things that we're interested in, or that I'm interested in anyway, are I'm looking for certain tangible applications to them, and I think that could be something. Like I'm not actually saying, well, I want to design a game situation with Pac-Man personalities that are more advanced or whatever. But at the same time, I think that as a platform might be really good for doing some of the things that we're talking about. So obviously, I'm just kind of noting that. But then secondly, I wish Anson was here because that would be a tremendous opportunity for a lot of this allostatic work, which is very much tied to personalities and very much tied to I don't want to speak for him, but I might say something like essentially geometric or topographical differences that affect homeostatic and allostatic regulation and the interpretation of information, and also are also related to personality or certain like physical or personal expressions. I feel like that's like is like definitely something he would say, oh, I want to work on that. So I'm kind of speaking for him a little bit here, but I would like to revisit that in some form for sure.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that again, like it's really about like how do you represent behaviors, like complex behaviors? What is an emotion? Is it something that you can model just very simply? Can you model something that's really like complex and because we always think emotions as pretty complex things, but maybe they're not maybe so complex. But no, I think that's great. I'll have to maybe work this out. And okay, Ash, thank you for attending. So I guess we're done for the day. I just wanted to bring those things up. And so maybe in the next year, in the new year, we'll do something on that a little bit more in depth. So have a good week. Survive the snow, Jesse.
Yeah, I'm actually about to get out.
I'll do here. Check this out. I think this is gonna be me. But can I flip this camera? Well, I'll just do this. Here you go. I'm at Stewart's. This is a local like coffee shop now.
Okay.
A local like gas station, whatever. But like that's what's on the ground, and it's gonna be like probably twice as much that I'm gonna be shoveling through because it's built up snow that I gotta go help clear out. So live footage. My gear. So shovel. So
yeah.
Take care. It's good meeting.
Yeah. Well, stay safe.
Yeah, I'm okay, but there'll be some work. So. All right. See you next time.
See you next time. All right. Bye.